Let's get going here. A couple things before we go to the vote list. Hold on one second here. So we have a date for the committee dinner, and so the information just went out, and it's going to be the 27th of March, and it's going to start at 6 p.m. And if you check your email, you'll see all the particulars. So, just put that on your calendar, and I just want to give you that heads up. The 27th of March, it's 6 p.m. Yeah, we're not saying, yeah. And I don't think the rest of the world needs to know where it is. It'll be in your email. So, okay. Correct. So, and then secondly, when we get through hopefully this will work out. We have, like we did with Sarah Augustine yesterday, there, we have some big bills that sometimes I think there's value to having, just getting some issues out, some conversation before we start talking votes. We have such a bill, Senate Bill 783, which is Senator Elford's bill, which is a result of the Solar Incentive Task Force. And she is now voting up in B&T, but when we're done voting, we're going to at least see if she's available. I wanted her to come down and just sort of frame the issues for the committee. And we can maybe get some questions on the table because the bill's still being worked on. But I think we'll save a lot of time after if we end up putting a bill in front of the committee, not having to go back and ask all the same questions. So hopefully that'll work out, but it's subject. I don't have any control over the budget and tax. I know that one of my bills is on their list, so I don't want her coming down when they're voting on one of my bills. But that said, so that's just, if you can stick around right after we vote for that. Okay, with that said, let's look at our list here, and we're going to start, just look quickly in terms of sequence. Okay, I'd like to start with a lot of work, and I mean a lot of work has gone into Senate Bill 818, the Artificial Intelligence Bill, the Artificial Intelligence Governance Act of 2024, which is a great title. And Alexis has put a lot of work into it. I see Ross here. Sarah Hester and a lot of people have put a lot of work into this. So let's start with 818.
Kate.
Yes.
Kate. Sorry. No, go.
I'm sorry. Okay, we're gonna start with 818, and Alexis, why don't you lead off and do what you can, and then we'll take questions and we'll see where we are at that point. Okay.
All right. So broadly, Senate Bill 818 establishes procedures and protocols for procurement, assessment, impact analysis of artificial intelligence, and provides a definition of AI throughout provisions of the code. I just kind of walk through this one pager, and the corresponding reprint was passed out separately. So it's separate from the packet. Let me just go through. On page 7 is where we start with some of the substantive information. Page 7 in line 16 requires executive branch units to conduct an annual data inventory based on guidance by the chief data officer within the Department of Information Technology. A definition of artificial intelligence is established on page 8, line 8. This is identical to Governor Moore's executive order, most recent executive order, and was also based off of federal guidance. Page 8.1, after line 26. These provisions broadly exempt higher education institutions.
Page 8, I'm seeing that as a Lewis Young. What am I missing?
Of the separate reprint, the
separate reprint, and I asked about that and I was, okay. All right, sorry. Thank you.
No problem.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep. So page 8.1 broadly exempts institutions of higher education in the state from complying with artificial intelligence related provisions. However, there's a carve out for those higher ed institutions to adopt policies and procedures for artificial intelligence for non-academic and non-research purposes. So if there's a business or associated purpose that is not academic and that is not research, they do have to comply with those procedures that are adopted. Page 8.1, well, pages 8.1 through 9, requires regular instead of annual systems inventories beginning on December 1st, 2025 for systems that are rights impacting or systems impacting as defined. And there is a definition within subtitle 8 of the bill. for systems impacting and rights impacting, essentially suggesting that if it has an impact on the civil rights of a person or a significant material or legal effect, and those consequences are included in the AI, it would be within this definition. And safety is another provision or another consideration of that definition if it could cause a harm to the physical safety of an individual based on its use.
All of these before questions, or should we stop when we have a question?
You
quite a
know,
bit.
actually, yeah, I mean, if you, yeah, let's go, as we go along, maybe that'd be better, because, you know, you could get, I don't know how long the presentation will be. So Alexis, as we go through, I think it'd be okay to just interject, you know, with questions as we move forward. So Senator Watson, why don't you lead off, and we'll just go through this, you know, piece at a time.
On page 8.1, section 26, the exclusions of those 1, 2, 3, 4 colleges and universities. What are they being excluded from?
So the impact assessments, the data inventories, policies and procedures basically wouldn't necessarily apply to them unless they are contracting for a business purpose that isn't academic or isn't research.
So I'm just trying to understand, you know, Bowie State University has a cyber program and why they're not included in this, or
So
should
they would be able to develop their own regarding the use of AI,
They can develop their own.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, back to you, Alexis. You want to keep going?
Sure.
And again, everybody, if you didn't see it, there is this one page kind of summary document, which I think is very helpful. Okay. Yeah, Senator Simon.
Because I was going along with Senator Watson. How did we come up with these 4 on page 8.1, 26A? How do we come up with 1, 2, 3, and 4? And were all the other university vetted through that same process and they didn't fit some criteria to get on this list?
So this is the kind of general list, because within USM, there are quite a few that are integrated. Frostburg, Towson, College Park, et cetera. So this is pretty comprehensive, and it is the 4 that are included for other like broader exemption purposes throughout this portion of the code.
So, for example, there's a lot of community colleges. Why just Baltimore City Community College?
They're
And also,
think about that one.
and also Senator Hester's available, I think, you know.
Whoever.
Senator Hester, if you want to.
Well, I was trying to say that I had the same exact question about 3 hours ago. And I was told, and this was my intent, that everybody is treated the same way, but everybody else falls underneath the University System of Maryland, except for Morgan, St. Mary's, and Baltimore City Community College. Now, if it's not right, then we should get it fixed, but.
So all the other community colleges fall under University System of Maryland?
Okay, and by the way, Ross worked on this too. Ross, you're here, so you can be available to answer this question. And then we'll go to Senator Washington. They went away into.
I think the answer on this one is the bill is applying to state institutions. Baltimore City Community College is, I think, the only community college that is a state institution and thus will be covered by the bill. All of the local community colleges are units of local government, and so the bill does not apply.
Gotcha.
Okay. And
That's right.
why,
Wait, what was the last part?
Is
a public, but it is not under USM.
Right.
Neither is St. Mary's.
So that all the other public universities fall under the University System of Maryland, and then these are the 2 that do not.
sure,
Yep,
Senator
that's
Simon.
right.
Based on Ross's. These are exceptions for basically these institutions, and then the rest would have to fall under this. But in B, it says subtitle applies to all public senior higher education institute. It doesn't say state. So does that mean?
So that is a definition within the education article, which is similar to the definition that we have here. The only difference is that Baltimore City Community College isn't included in this, so it would be fully exempt from the purview of the bill, but there's overlap because it's in separate parts of the code, but we're trying to cover the same.
All right, let me cut to the
Institutions.
chase. Are community colleges in the bill, in the scope of this bill, or are they not in the scope of this?
Not.
Bill? Okay,
Yeah, generally they are not.
Okay, and Sarah Washington, you had your light on earlier. Did that? We are good? Okay. Okay, let's go back to you, Alexis. And again, as questions, if you have questions, we'll get them answered.
Just pulling one thing up here. I think we're on page 8.1. So the amended language in line 27, it sort of reduces the recurrence of these inventories, the system inventories. Whereas as introduced, the inventories of the AI systems had to be each year, beginning on December 1st, 2024. This extends it, delays it to December 1st, 2025. And instead of the inventory having to include all types of AI systems, it only is narrowed to rights impacting or safety impacting AI, the definition of which is on page 8. I'm gonna get a closer look there. And it doesn't have to be each year. It can be recurring or regular intervals, but not at the prescriptive yearly time frame. So the systems inventory is required to be submitted to the Department of IT. And has to include the name of the system, vendor information, whether the system had an impact assessment conducted on it. And instead of an inventory of each system being placed on DO-IT's website, DO-IT is required to aggregate the data and post it on the website unless there is a cybersecurity breach with the publication of that inventory. On page 9, line 18, the amendments require impact assessments on artificial intelligence that is rights impacting or systems impacting based on the schedule outlined. The governor's artificial intelligence subcabinet is able to increase the frequency of these impact assessments in their determination. We later codified the subcabinet. Pages 9, 9.1, and 10 requires DO-IT to adopt policies and procedures governing the use of rights impacting or systems impacting AI. Again, mindful of the exemptions of the higher education institutions that we just talked about. Page 10 prohibits the procurement of a system that employs AI unless it conforms to policies and procedures adopted beginning on January 1st, 2025. Pages 10 through 12 codifies and expands the governor's artificial intelligence subcabinet of the governor's executive council. Purpose of the subcabinet is to facilitate cooperation about AI amongst executive branch units. Page 13 authorizes the governor to include the lesser amount of either $2 million or the amount necessary to cover wages, salaries, software upgrades, and licensing in the fiscal year 2026 budget. Pages 13.1 through 17 establishes proof of concept procurements as a separate procurement that does not require Board of Public Works approval if they are under $1 million. And this is overseen through Department of General Services. On page 18, the amendments require a roadmap on risk and opportunities in AI to be developed by the subcabinet in consultation with relevant executive branch units by December 1st, 2024. The roadmap must include plans to comprehensively study AI in multiple sectors, healthcare, jobs, workforce development, criminal justice system, et cetera. Page 18.1 adds language indicating that this rolls in Senator Kagan's amendment, indicating that it is the intent of the General Assembly to essentially study the feasibility of a virtual 311 portal and to prioritize procurement of a virtual 311 portal if they deem it feasible. And also requires a report by December 1st, 2025 by the subcabinet to the General Assembly on the sufficiency of the subcabinet to accomplish the state AI goals that are expounded upon in the bill.
Bit of a summary of the bill, and you've got the reprint, the summary document. Senator Watson, Let's take questions now.
Can you just give me the definition of rights impacting versus, what's the other one? Safety impacting?
Sure. So rights impacting is on page 8,
8.
and it means, and there's a printer error here under subsection, let me see. Subsection 3.5801F, that should say rights impacting artificial intelligence. And, looks like the printer. Anyway, so rights impacting artificial intelligence is AI whose output serves as a basis for decisions or actions that has a legal, material, or similarly significant effect on an individual's or community's rights, liberties, privacy, equal opportunities, access to critical resources. Systems impacting talks more about threats to life, wellness, ecosystems, critical infrastructure, data privacy, things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, do we have some additional questions on the table here? Senator Hester, you want to add anything? This, the AI bill here is a pretty important piece of legislation, so we want to make sure everybody understands what we're doing here.
I have a couple technical drafting things I'd like to put out there, but certainly if people have, questions about the bill broadly, what it does, what it doesn't do, be happy to answer them. I think.
Any questions for this? When do you want to make, maybe, why don't you make a few big points here I think,
Okay,
for the greater
so-
good for the committee?
Let's see. I mean, I fundamentally think that like artificial intelligence is, the next big thing, right? And that's an understatement, and it's got risks and opportunities. And I think that this bill takes a balanced approach to seeing what we're doing in state government and making sure that we're both looking at the upside and the downside. The fiscal note came in like higher than expected. And so what we've done is we're only focusing on this AI, which is potentially rights or safety impacting. So we're not like looking at everything to say like, is this good or bad? It's the stuff that can make a real consequential decision for a citizen of the state of Maryland. And if it makes that, if there's a chance that it's making a determination of your healthcare benefits or safety on the road or, some kind of, environmental thing, then we're going to look at it, assess it and say like, hey, this is, is this AI working the way it should be? And is it creating any disparate impact? The fiscal note came in high because we were like assessing everything. And so by saying we're focusing on this, potentially high risk stuff, and we're spreading it out over time, the fiscal note has come down significantly. And one of the things that I was thinking about is that most of the scary stuff is kind of yet to come. So if we put a line in the sand and say, on, this date, we're going to start assessing going forward, then we're kind of protecting ourselves from buying or developing anything with this really new high-end AI in it. Then we give ourselves a few more years to look back and just spot check and say, like, hey, did we inadvertently pick up something that could be dangerous that we're already using? We don't know about it. So that stretches that out over the next 2 or 3 years. So with that said, the fiscal note now is significantly less than the fiscal note said it was.
Okay, back to your technical, you want to just put it out there for our purposes, because we may need to, you to offer an amendment if it's easily describable.
First, if I'm going
Sure,
to.
yeah, I guess the answer to that is yes. Any questions before we take any action on these amendments? Yes, Senator Gallion.
So you mentioned about the fiscal note getting cut a good bit. You have like a ballpark, so it's taking it from 7 to 8 down to like 1 or 2 or 4, or just rough. You have a rough estimate on that?
Yeah, so it depends on how quickly they ramp up, but I think it's closer to 2.
Okay,
2 for a full year going forward. If they do everything that they're supposed to do, it will take a while to staff up.
okay.
So
You want to move
I would
the
love to move
amendments?
the amendments, and I'd like to thank, Ross and Senator Kagan and our wonderful drafter for their help.
Okay, so we've got a motion favorable on this set of amendments, a second from Vice Chair Kagan. Discussion. Okay, all in favor of these amendments that are in this reprint, raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, the amendments carry. Now I'm going to go back to you on the technical amendments that you may want to add on here.
So I believe on reprint page 9, in the what would have been line 19.2, there's a couple dates. The first one is correct, February 1, 2027. The second one, I believe, should be February 1, 2025.
Wait, which page, Senator? You said page nine.
Page 9 of the reprint, line 19.2.
Okay.
The first February is February 2027,
Mhm.
but I believe the next February should be February 1, 2025. Just a drafting error.
Okay, Alexis, do you have that? Moving it from February 1, 2026 to February 1, 2025? Is that where we're talking?
Yeah, I'm reading through it.
Because that's the point in the same, the line that we're drawing is that starting on February 1, 2025, we're gonna look at everything we buy after that point and say like, hey, now if we're buying something new or developing something new, doesn't have potential to be rights or safety impacting. And then starting in 2027, we're gonna look backwards and we're gonna say, okay, is there anything that we purchased before February 1, 2025? So we wouldn't want to have a gap of a year there.
Okay, do you have any
Okay.
other technical amendments?
I have one other one.
Okay, why don't we hear that and then we can maybe take one vote to adopt the technical amendments plural.
Okay. The other, we went back and forth about how prescriptive to be, but on page 13, under line 22, this is where I said Senator Gallion, I think it's about $2 million. This language actually, caps the amount that the governor can spend on $2 million specifically for these 4 things. And we were, it was a decision made in the last, when we were editing this and trying to bring it down, that we add this in. And then we just decided, so we had a draft amendment to put it in, and then we're thinking that it's probably too prescriptive. And so we'd like to take it out so the governor doesn't have a roof or a ceiling, but can do as appropriate. So it gives the administration more discretion. So my amendment would be that we should actually strike everything that is in 3.5-807.
Okay, does everybody understand that? We're on page 13. And Alexis, are we clear on that?
Very clear.
Okay, is there a motion on these 2 technical amendments proffered by Senator Hester? Is there a
I'm not
motion?
Sure that I'm gonna agree with 3.5807 being technical. I mean, that's substantive. It's responsible. It's fiscal,
Okay,
but I don't think it's
okay,
technical.
okay.
It was,
Fair
but
enough.
it's not technical. It is a drafting error. They did not intend this to be in this amendment.
Okay,
Okay, I'm not going to call it technical or anything. I'm going to
No.
call it drafting error / technical
it's
amendments.
just
How do we?
an amendment. Yeah.
Okay,
So-
fair. Okay. Thank you, Vice Chair Kagan. Move favorable on these 2 additional amendments, however you characterize them.
Yeah.
Senator Washington, you're second. All in favor of these 2 additional amendments, raise your hand. All opposed, those amendments carry. So we have Senate Bill 818 with those amendments. Yes, and discussion.
Technical amendment, if allowed, can postpone.
I would welcome a close Anybody else?
Okay, well, that's definitely not a technical amendment. Okay, who wants to be on the bill? Okay, we've got Lewis, Young,
The mug.
Watson, Augustine, Kagan, Feldman, Simon Air, Washington, and Brooks. Did you get that?
Nope, one more time.
Mhm.
Okay, one more
Everyone-
time.
Is it everybody?
No, we're gonna reel out names here. Okay, Lewis, Young, Watson, Augustine, Kagan, Feldman, Simon Air, Washington, and Brooks.
Got it.
Okay, got that?
Yep.
All in favor of the sponsor amendment, raise your hand. All opposed? That sponsor amendment carries. We now have 818 with those amendments we've adopted in front of us. Is there a motion on the table? Motion
Second.
favorable from Senator Hester, a second from Senator Kagan. Let's take a roll call. Let's make this official.
All right, Senator Kagan,
Absolutely.
Senator Kagan, yes, Senator Augustine. Yes. Senator Augustine, yes, Senator Gallion.
Yes.
Senator Gallion, yes, Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes, Senator Lewis Young.
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes, Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes, Senator Hester. Senator Hester, yes, Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes, Senator Simon Air.
Yes.
Senator Simon Air, yes, and Senator Feldman.
Yes, that bill carries 10-0. And we're next we're gonna stay with Senator Hester. And let's just go to Senate Bill 978. And Stacy, that's yours.
Okay.
And why don't you explain what that bill does?
Senate Bill 978, Election Law, Synthetic Media, Disclosure and Regulation. This emergency bill requires specified persons that publish, distribute, or disseminate synthetic media within 90 days of an election to either publish the original content that was manipulated to generate the synthetic media on the person's website, or submit the original material to the State Board of Elections for publishing on the State Board of Elections website. The bill also, 1, establishes specified disclosure requirements for synthetic media, 2, authorizes the State Board of Elections to adopt specified regulations, and 3, authorizes a specified enforcement of the bill's requirements. There is one amendment offered by the sponsor, Senator Hester, and you'll see those starting on page 30 of your packet, and the reprint begins on 33, which will probably be more helpful in this circumstance. So what these amendments do is narrow the applicability of the bill to candidates, campaign finance entities, and persons required to register with the State Board of Elections because they make independent expenditures or electioneering communications, and participating organizations or an agent of any of the above. It strikes the definition of news media entity and substitutes an applicability provision. It strikes the harm to reputation prohibition. It strikes provisions requiring persons to submit certain media to the State Board of Elections. Strikes provisions requiring the State Board to adopt specified regulations in alignment with those other strikes. And it strikes the enhanced penalty amounts, and it changes the effective date to June 1 from an emergency bill. So essentially what these do is they narrow the scope a little bit, make sure this is all related to synthetic media produced regarding clearly identified candidates versus just any person that produces media within 90 days of an election. So it strikes the provisions that would require the State Board of Elections to publish certain the original content that the manipulated media was made from. We're striking that out, and that's put on. Instead, they just have each person who makes the content has to have a disclosure, and then they have to meet certain requirements if it's an audio, if it's a still image, or if it's a video production. So looking through the reprint will make it a lot more clear.
Okay, we're gonna take some questions. We're gonna start with Senator Watson.
All right, so Stacy, the 90-day piece is now no longer valid?
Right. Now, given the narrowed scope, meaning that it only applies to synthetic media about clearly identified candidates,
Right.
then it wouldn't need to be. You could do it through the entire election season and not just 90 days before an election. So for example, if you were 92 days before the election and you were a campaign finance entity that produced a manipulated video, then these provisions would apply to you, and you could not produce that without doing the requisite disclosure requirements.
But the disclosure requirements is just a written disclaimer at this point.
Well, they're pretty significant. So on a still image, they have to have certain text, and they have to be placed on the image in a certain way. For an audio manipulation, they have to make certain statements in a certain manner, and they have to be played throughout depending on the length of the audio recording. Similarly with a video recording as well.
So within 90 days, what happens?
Nothing. I mean, they all within 90 days, they still apply. We're just taking out that narrow period, and it's lengthening the period.
So I'm just trying to see if you do it within 90 days, if you were doing something nefarious, the damage would already be done, right? You would have already taken an opportunity to influence the voters. And so anything done, after that fact, it's kind of like too little, too late, isn't it?
Well, I think instead of having just a narrow window that the state board can regulate these types of manipulations, it's at any time that it applies to a candidate,
Okay.
anytime.
All right, I think I got it. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Simon Ayer.
So just to the definition of synthetic media. So when my first re-election campaign, I got to feel the full weight of campaigns. And they had this one where I had stayed down here a couple of nights during the snow. So they had this picture of me, big fat cat, and they had, lobster and caviar, and I'm staying at the hotel. And they made me look like double the size that I was. So they kind of would that fall under this? I mean, where's the scope of Adobe altering images and things like that? So I'm just kind of, where's that boundary?
Okay, Stacy or Senator Hester, whoever wants to.
Well,
take a shot.
it says purporting to depict a real, clearly identified candidate or the speech or conduct of the candidate, or producing a fundamentally different understanding or impression of an individual's appearance, speech, conduct than a reasonable individual would have from the unaltered original version of the image, audio recording, or video recording. So unless it was satire, they're saying you're a fat cat, and so they made you a little fatter, then, you know, that might be satire within acceptable boundaries. If they're trying to say that, for example, a lot of the deep fakes that these are called, they have, for example, a Hillary Clinton saying, you know, I'm going to vote for Trump. I mean, that is obviously out of the bounds of reality. So in that case, that would be considered a deep fake.
I completely understand the over the top ones, but it's the other ones, negative and positive, right? So you have a photo of myself. I'm like, you know, I could make myself look a little better and so forth. So I, you know, Photoshop a little. So, yeah. So, I mean,
Did you do that to yourself? Then it would not be a deep fake.
but the other one would, the example I gave in the beginning, would that be considered something that would have to be registered? And who determines that?
Well, in this case, I think it's the State Board of Elections would be the regulator here. And they would, if it's similar to campaign materials, if there was a concern that this would give a fundamental impression that wasn't accurate and there was an intent to kind of make a fraudulent impression, then you would want to disclose on that particular piece of manipulated media that it was in fact manipulated.
Okay, we're gonna go to Vice Chair Kagan, then we'll go to Senator Lewis Young.
Of course, right after I took a bite of salad. I'm building on Senator Simoner's question. Does it matter whether the manipulated mailer or ad comes from an opponent, a political party, an independent expenditure, an interest group?
Those are all covered entities under the bill.
Thank you. I have more questions, but thank
Okay,
you.
let's get around, we're gonna get them all out here. Senator Lewis Young, and then we'll go Senator Augustine after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I also have a similar experience to Senator Simoner. Part of it, I think, might not be covered, but basically a postcard with me in a lobster bill, limousine, taking lavish vacations on taxpayer dollars. I was at an NCSL conference and there's documented evidence. I was at the conference. I voted on a number of things. So would the part about taking lavish vacations on taxpayer dollars be a violation under this particular bill?
The image isn't false. I mean, did you
Right.
actually wear the bib? Is this actually a real image?
I'm less concerned about the image than the implication of a lavish vacation when I was at an NCSL conference.
So it says to attempts to influence either casting a vote or a decision to vote. I mean, that's part of the definition here. So I'm not going to disagree that this is a difficult.
We're in a little gray zone. I think we can
Yeah.
all
Okay,
agree.
thanks.
This is a bit of a gray area. We're gonna go to Senator Brooks, and then we'll go to the sponsor, Senator Hester.
Thanks, Chair. Stacy,
Yes.
on this, it says this is considered a misdemeanor and is a fine of 1,000?
Yeah.
That's for the first offense. What about the second offense? Any succeeding offense? It still would be a maximum of 1,000?
Yes. Yes, that's the fine for the penalty.
Okay. So I could do it 4 or 5 times, it'd just be 1,000 per incident? Or that just the one fine. And I can.
Well, you could also be subject to, what is it? You could also be subject to imprisonment exceeding 1 year of
1 year.
both
Right.
and ineligible to hold any public or party office for 4 years after the date of the offense. So if your
Okay.
campaign entity wanted to do that and take the chance,
Right. Okay. Thank you. Next year.
Suppose part of this is a deterrent effect, maybe. We'll see. Senator Augustine,
Okay.
you're up next.
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of things. Number one on my mind is first I want to just deal with the fact that we're just keeping it to people who initially play by the rules because they're the ones who will have registered and everything else. I mean, a lot of folks just don't play by the rules. And what are we doing about them? Or is it just that we're trying to keep this scope sort of narrow to the people who have played by the rules versus people who are trying to influence and, they're not going to register. So I guess I would ask the sponsor that, and then I do have a follow-up.
Senator Hester?
So, you are absolutely correct. This only applies to registered entities, which are the people that play by the rules. I am open for other suggestions if you have ways, but it's hard to track down to people doing, fake news coming from other countries. Jared Emeritus from the Board of Elections worked on the amendment. He worked on the bill and he worked on the amendments with council. He apologizes he couldn't be here today. He said he's available to answer questions by text, but I'm like, it's not really that helpful.
It's hard.
He'd be available tomorrow, just to be,
Jared, would you be available to tomorrow? I think it's probably a delay.
okay, well,
But I think the line, we looked at a lot of legislation, right? And, some states have like flat out said that, the deep fakes are illegal. And so the point of this bill, we're trying to walk that line between allowing the freedom of expression with the label on it.
Right.
But it's, I think this is a field of elections that's, we're going to have to come back and revisit every year. And so fundamentally, the question is, we want something on the books for this year. We just want to.
Okay, and then I just have a follow-up question. It's not this, but we have in my county, I'll just say we do sample ballots. And we do these sample ballots and we'll put it out. It'll have like a lot of folks' pictures on there and stuff like that. But then, other folks want to do them too. And they'll put our pictures on or put different people on who actually are not supportive of them, and then they'll put themselves on there and stuff like that. And they put their authority line on that. There's some, they're not unwilling to put it out with their authority line, but it's just not true, actually. How does this impact that situation? Would that impact that situation? So
I think it depends on if the image, what was altered, but fundamentally they would just have to have the authority line and then they have to say the disclaimer, that it has been altered or modified through the use of a computer programs to display an event or image that did not occur in reality.
or if they're trying to give the impression that this person is supportive of that by putting a picture on there that knowingly
oh yeah, they know
that individual does not support that position, then yes.
Well, they
would be.
know.
With
For
the
sure
attempt
they
to
know.
influence a vote,
That's what they're trying
or-
to do.
then yes, it would fall under that definition. It says producing a fundamentally different understanding or impression of an individual's appearance, speech, or conduct than a reasonable individual would have from the unaltered original version of the image, audio recording, or video recording. So the question, I guess, would be in that circumstance, is it an altered video? Is it an altered image? For example, did they take an image of a certain group that was at a meeting and then they stuck somebody else in there?
Yes.
Then that would be an altered image. And like campaign finance material, they would have to put this disclosure on there that this image, as it says in the bill, they would have to put this image has been manipulated, and then whatever the other requirements are. If they did not do that, they would be subject to the penalty provisions on conviction.
Okay.
So I did hear back from the administrator. He says he can be here tomorrow.
Well, okay, we may end up, based on all this, and I am getting some communication from the committee that they would like the benefit of maybe having Mr. Demarinis here before we take some formal action. But before we do that, I think it's useful to get all the issues out on the table. And then when he comes, we can hone in real quickly. And so I think that makes sense to me unless somebody has a different view. But Sarah Watson, why don't we go to you next?
Yeah, just Stacy, just for clarification. So in the case of a sample ballot, the picture is not altered. It is an exact pull from, say, what's on the MDGA website placed on here. The issue is, I guess, the intent of the person who is putting it forward, leading the public to believe that this person is supportive. And with the three pieces you mentioned, I can't remember, it's altering this, bing, bing, bing. I don't know that that really captures not manipulating the photo at all, just using it without permission from the person who is being depicted. And I think that if we can put somehow that language in there, then that solves the sample ballot issue.
That may fall under a different provision of the election law article about, fraudulent usage of other things, or maybe your campaign material is not accurate, might not be a deep fake under the provisions of this particular bill.
Okay, I see the
mean,
nuance, but
right.
that is an issue that we really need to grapple with.
Yeah, one of the
Okay.
benefits of having Mr. Demarinis, he may be able to, he'll probably go back and watch these questions and he'll come back in tomorrow. He's watching right now, so
Yeah.
he'll be able to answer all these questions. So throw all the questions out, pretending he's here, and he's going to come actually tomorrow with answers to all the questions. Vice Chair Kagan, you're next.
The way I read, Stacy, on page 34, the lines 17 through 20, producing a fundamentally different understanding, following up on Senator Watson's question. Senator Watson?
Right.
No, following up on your question.
Yes.
What if the photo on the MDGA website or on your own website or whatever is the candidate from 30 years ago? Or some long number of years ago. And so the altering the impression could be, I want you to think I'm younger than I am, more active, more something than I am. I wonder where the line is on that, Stacy, because that's clearly misrepresenting, but it's also something that a lot of people do. So I'm not looking for an answer. That might be rhetorical and that might be something for Jared tomorrow.
Okay, let's go Senator Brooks next.
Thanks again, Chair.
But not only is he watching, he's taking very copious notes as we're speaking here. He just texted me. Okay.
Stacey, who would make the charge about that being a fake? Because in a situation where, say, you're on a ticket, a team, and then this person just sends out a picture of one of your team members and his picture. And I guess the person whose picture he's got on there, they feel as though they're getting a free piece of ad, at no cost to the team. Would the whole team have to make the claim against that, or just?
I think it's similar to how other violations of the election law get reported. They get reported by whoever determines that they think there's been a violation. So
Okay.
they go to the state board or the state administrator and they say, they hand in that piece of material and they say, we think this is a violation of your synthetic media prohibitions or on your campaign material violations. They end up being kind of a self-executing thing rather than somebody out searching for them.
I see. Okay. All right. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, Sir Watson.
Last question. I mean, I understand the intent of this, but we all have a certain way we do business. I mean, it is not uncommon for us to take a photo and Senator Watson's not absent and they Photoshop me in the photo. Now, in that case, it's a clearly altered photo, but it has my, express permission to use it as such. However, I didn't take the photo, nor did I place myself in it. So who's responsible for the disclaimer if one is even needed in that instance?
The individual who's producing the piece
Okay.
of altered video, audio, image, or the campaign material is responsible for making the disclosure, because the disclosure would have to be on the altered image. If they have your permission, it's not, I'm not sure, is that considered false?
Well, so say I run a video clip and I cobble a whole bunch together.
Right.
The standard disclaimer, I'm Senator Watson, I approve this message. Does that take care of everything that's embedded in that clip? Photos, videos, audio?
No. If you were trying to create a false impression of something and you took the video and you decided to garble it or slow it down or speed it up because you don't want certain things to be heard, or you want, you're trying to create an impression of reality that doesn't exist. Not just because relative to something that you don't have any control over. I'm saying, for example, you and Senator Hester had a conversation separate and they were about different subjects. But if you cobble them all together, they sound awesome about your last bill. So you put that all together. That would be considered a deep fake, because that is creating an impression of reality that it doesn't exist. And that would have to have a disclosure on your piece, because Senator Hester was not in fact talking about your piece of legislation, but that was all cobbled together to make it look that way.
What would a
That would be
disclosure statement look like or sound like?
Well,
Is
it
in the
is
bill?
right here conveniently right in the bill. So it would say let's see here. Say it's an audio recording. For the media that is only an audio recording, the disclosure shall include the statement, "This audio has been altered or modified through the use of a computer programs to display a sound that did not occur in reality. The statement required under this paragraph shall read, in a clearly spoken manner at a pitch and speed that can easily be heard by the average listener, and at the beginning of the audio recording and at the end of the audio recording, and for audio recordings of 2 minutes duration or longer, interspersed throughout at intervals of not more than 2 minutes." So in that particular case, if you have a 3-minute video, you would have to make the disclosure that said, "This audio has been altered or modified through the use of at the beginning and at the end and at the 2-minute interval."
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Since we're putting them out, just the last kind of
Absolutely.
thing is for me, because it may be okay, because it really, to me, I get it with regard to the videos and the audio recording. It's just this image part that's the only thing that's like getting me a little hung up. Because it does say it has to be one that manipulated with the use of generative AI.
Where's that?
Excuse me?
Where's the generative AI?
Oh, I'm looking in the reprint on page 34, I think, is synthetic media means. I'm just looking at the definition of the synthetic media. Is it not the case?
Or other digital technology, right?
Oh, okay, or other digital technology. And so I guess it's in there. It's part of where I'm trying to figure out. So the other digital technology would be a camera?
Computer.
Or a computer?
Your phone.
Or a phone?
Yeah.
So it just captures everything. So it's just a picture.
Let's let the sponsor.
So the reason I started thinking about this was the ability to use generative AI to produce a video of it's a senator saying something that they didn't say.
Right.
And, this is now, it's possible for you to do a prompt and to produce that, picture of that grandmother cooking the gnocchi that we all saw. You could also say, could you please generate me a picture of Senator so-and-so, a still image of Senator so-and-so walking on, this planet, in a bikini doing blah, blah, blah. And it would look really a lot like the senator.
Right.
And so there's a whole range of different stuff that's possible. But I think, when you think about the risk that can be done, I think, right now, you kind of see a piece of mail and you're like, it's you like when I get mail in my house, I don't believe everything I read. Right.
Right.
But I think that where we are is because of this new technology, especially with video and audio, right? You're tempted. People aren't thinking about as judgmentally about the video that they see, I think, as they are about the other stuff. But it's a hard area. Okay.
Any additional, Vice Chair Kane, you're gonna have the last word and
Okay.
we're gonna let Jared get away from his computer. He may have
Yeah.
other things to do today. other than
So Senator Hester, if you don't believe everything you see and read, you are in the top tippy top, not really typical percentage, because I think most people do believe.
Right.
And what this whole conversation is reminding me of, which was not a campaign, it was the cover of, I think it was Time, but it might have been Newsweek. It was one of those when they took O.J. Simpson's photo and they darkened his skin. And remember, that was before people were doing that. And they were looking to make him a scary black man. And he was darker than his skin was when he was during the trial or after he was arrested or something. That's what we're talking about. And that led people to have a different impression than the affable, you know.
Right now. I mean, we get those ads now.
Totally. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that's what we need to think about. And on a campaign trail, it's even more complicated and there's less time to correct it. And possibly less money to correct it.
Yeah, well, I think that's to Senator Watson's point about once the damage is done and if you have short timelines, it's kind of like not even, there's no good remedy. Okay, so with all that, Mr. Marinus, you got your homework and we're gonna hold this bill and we will take this up first thing when we vote tomorrow, which we will do some more voting. Let's stay in the committee because we have a bill here that also has to go to B&T. Senator Lewis Young's bill, Senate Bill 902. So let's take that up next, Sarah, because again, this still has to go to Budget and Tax.
Senate Bill 902, Wildlife Protections and Highway Crossings. This bill establishes various requirements for the Department of Natural Resources and the State Highway Administration relating to the identification and prioritization of threatened and endangered species whose habitat or movement corridors intersect with state highways, the completion of a statewide deer population survey and related habitat maps to assist with identifying areas where wildlife crossing or wildlife vehicle collision mitigation projects will reduce collisions between vehicles and deer, the design of new bridges, culverts, and state highways, and the replacement or renovation of existing bridges and culverts. The bill also establishes the Wildlife Highway Crossing Fund in the Department of Natural Resources. Among other revenue sources, the bill establishes a $10 annual wildlife vehicle collision mitigation fee that must be paid for each insured motor vehicle in the state and remitted to the fund. There are 3 amendments, all from the sponsor of the bill. Amendment 1 makes, page 3, it begins. Amendment 1, which is on page 3, makes Amendment 1 on page 3 replaces the automobile insurance provider fee, instead requiring the department to develop a website to be used for accepting donations to the fund, and if feasible, work with the Motor Vehicle Administration to provide the option appearing on the vehicle registration portal to donate to the fund. Amendment 2 on page 4. And makes various obligations for the Department of Natural Resources under the bill, subject to the availability of funding, as well as including semi-aquatic threatened species in the scope of the bill. And then lastly, amendment number 3, which is on page 5, pages 5 through 9, with a reprint of that amendment only beginning on page 10. Alters a number of definitions, requires the State Highway Administration in consultation with the Department of Natural Resources to develop certain design guidelines, although design elements recommended in the guidelines are not required to be incorporated into the design, rehabilitation, or replacement of a bridge, culvert, or highway. If it will significantly increase the project cost or timeline, or is unreasonable, unfeasible, or not in accordance with relevant safety standards. The amendments accordingly strike several design, creation, and incorporation requirements currently in the bill. Lastly, the amendment clarifies that the bill is to apply only prospectively.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young, you want to add anything as the sponsor of the bill?
I would like to really summarize all that and essentially what happened. So the insurance organizations really did not want to include a $10 fee on their bill. They like the bill because the average animal-related accident is about $6,000 a year. or $6,000 an accident and $198 million a year. So they liked the bill, they just didn't want to be the ones to assess the fee. So we had a lot of conversations with SHA, MVA, MDOT, and that's why we amended the bill to say, assuming funding is available. Now, there is a federal source. The federal government has $109.5 million available. Virginia has used 604,000, Pennsylvania 840,000, Vermont 1.6 million. So federal funds are available. We're also looking for an avenue to supplement in the state, and that is one of the amendments as well, that we're looking to have it as an option when you renew your license. The other major amendments were designed to reduce the fiscal note. We don't know what it would be now, but we were pretty sure that the fiscal note will go down to zero due to three things. One, the addition of subject to the availability of funding, which I just mentioned. Two, removing specific infrastructure requirements and leaving it to SHA to determine that. And three, qualifying dates in the future for implementing certain items and clarifying that some items only need to be done if the prerequisites are completed. So that reduces or eliminates the fiscal note. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
He says that is fair. Senator Watson.
Thank you. I'm sorry I missed it. What is this bill trying to solve? What's the problem?
Helping Bambi cross the bridge. No. So there are, as I mentioned earlier, there are numerous accidents all over the country, but I focus the numbers on Maryland accidents because you hit a deer or a deer jumps out in front of you, although there are other animals as well. Animals cross highways, particularly when they're migrating. So what this bill is trying to do is to develop some safe crossings for animals that have a pattern of crossing certain areas. Actually, a project has already been successfully implemented in Prince George's County. So it has a couple of goals. One is certainly to reduce traffic accidents, and two, to try to protect wildlife.
So at these intersections where you would expect, say, deer to cross,
right?
What are you doing? I mean, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. Are you putting, like railroad crossings and letting the deers cross? Of course not. But
we're putting up signage. No, I
just don't see the value of the bill.
I'm not a highway engineer, so I can't explain in depth how these passages are constructed, but there's a history throughout the country. There are some border fences, and I think that's the most common. There are culverts. There's a variety of designs that range from the very simple to somewhat more complex, depending upon either funding availability and or complexity, or, well, I would say funding availability and priority, because clearly you want to address the areas where there's the most accidents. But there are methodologies that have been successfully implemented to reduce these accidents.
Okay, just to refresh folks, I correct me if I'm wrong. So State Farm was the only testimony in opposition now because they didn't want to have much to do with it. Now, because of the amendments, they are no longer opposed. So there isn't any, at least formal opposition to the bill, but that's, that's just for the benefit of the committee. Okay, that said, Senator Gallion.
Mr. Chair. So the part I like best about this was the getting the deer population survey. Is that still in there? Because that would cost something. That has to come from somewhere.
Sarah might have the answer there.
Yeah.
So there is still thank you, if you look at the reprint,
Okay, look.
yeah, and the deer population survey is still in the bill. It's on page 13 of your packet. However, it's subject to the availability of funding.
Okay, so it's not for sure. And then the change in the $10 fee to an option when you renew. Where is that again? Do they have a list of different options?
Being negotiated.
Okay, because I had a bill a couple years ago where I wanted to do something and the other group said, oh, we can't add an extra thing because it'll take money away from one of the other things that's in there. So I just like to know what the other options are when you renew. I'm trying to remember from the last time I renewed something. What's there, like 3 different things on there or something? Is this?
Well, they are amenable, but we haven't ironed out all the details yet. But what this bill would do was at least give us the ability to access federal funds, which is where we want to start, because unless we pass this bill, we're leaving federal money on the table.
And probably my biggest concern, we're spending time and money on this, and now I realize we're trying to get federal money and stuff, which is good. But to me, this is I don't mean to sound like I don't care about smaller animals, but when you're talking about damage to vehicles, like small animals are normally going to cause much damage. Is this pretty much about deer? Because they're the ones that are big enough to tear stuff up. So deer, 2 things: tearing up your vehicles, and also I always look at it from the amount of crop damage they do and the amount of money that we lose. So to me, I think our time and money would be better spent if we looked into ways of lessening the deer population and focusing solely on that, because that would help with that problem. Would help with multiple problems. So that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Although I told my own daughter hit a black bear in Western Maryland head on, over Christmas. It's not just deer. There's other, things on the roads, but that.
I'm following up on.
Okay, we'll go to Vice Chair Kagan, then we'll go. Yeah, go on.
Briefly, Dara flagged page 13 on if there's sufficient funding, but Senator Gallion, if you go further down on page 13, after line 23. If available funding is insufficient to conduct the statewide deer population survey required under the subsection, the department may conduct regional or hotspot surveys. So I thought you might find that helpful or reassuring. So it may be one of those you get half a loaf, but it's better than no loaf. Thank you.
Okay, let's go to we'll go to Senator Brooks, then Senator Hester.
Thanks, Chair. Madam Sponsor, I see that you've done extensive research on this. Let me ask, did you ever, I remember I grew up down south, and then we used to have these little things we called deer alert whistlers that we would put on the vehicle. And that's only about between $10 and $13, per vehicle. And it was, so as far as I know, it worked. It was very, very effective. So did you do any research on that, something of that nature?
Not do they work for bear too?
Deer. We don't have a whole bunch of bears down there, but it did work for the deer. So thanks, Chair.
Okay, Senator Hester.
I have a lot of thoughts, and speaking on support of the bill. I have had deer whistles, and I have hit a deer with my deer whistles in my car. So based on that anecdotal experience, my deer whistles weren't working. I dug into this pretty deep last year before I passed a deer management bill for Howard County. I mean, Howard County has the 10th highest car crashes with deer in the entire nation. And I got to imagine that Frederick County is like pretty darn close. And so there definitely is an issue. I would really support the deer population, survey in regional hotspots, starting in Howard County. But the Department of Natural Resources and the Department of Agriculture had, a summit this year and a work group. They've now got this program where they're trying to match hunters and farmers together. If anybody wants to hunt or sign up for this farming program, I just wanted to do a PSA. We're trying to get these farmers and hunters matched so that we can eliminate the deer population. But I think this is a good bill and I'll be supporting it.
Okay, any additional questions, comments, discussion? Do people feel like they have enough information to take the bill up? Yes, Senator Watson.
Make sure I'm clear. This bill does not increase folks' insurance, car insurance, right?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
The only funding under the amendment is an optional donation from people. There is the potential for federal funding and other things, but the mandatory $10 provision is removed with an optional.
Right, that was, you had State Farm in here, didn't like that. That's no longer in the bill. Sure. Senator Augustine.
In keeping with what Senator Gallion has said, I do recall I think it's CBF. Is that where they get, or is this different? Is that a different thing for them?
They get it with the.
They get it with the those who do have it. So this is not. I know, they get, what is it? The license plates.
Chesapeake Bay Foundation is the license plates. You can buy
They
the
just the
specific
license plates
ones.
and not any additional on the registration or anything like that. Because I just know, he said, there have been times when people do get sort of protective of this.
Now, I will
Of
say that
these-
the provision about the MVA's thing is a requirement on the department, if feasible, to work with the MVA. It's quite soft, I suppose, in the obligation.
So they may or may not do it.
It may not be feasible.
Oh.
If these things, I believe Senator Lewis Young said that that's still being negotiated.
Okay. Senator Augustine, do you have enough information?
sure.
Okay, Senator Lewis Young, do you want to at least put on the table your amendments? Because you have amendments. Okay, we have a motion from Senator Lewis Young. Is there a second? Second from Senator Hester. Okay, discussion. Okay, since there was, robust conversation, let's at least on these amendments, we're going to do a roll call. Again, we're just on the amendments.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine.
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
Yes.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson. Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yeah.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa.
Yes.
Senator Carosa, yes. Senator Hester.
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire.
Yes.
Senator Simonaire, yes. Senator Feldman.
Okay, yes, the amendments carry unanimously. Now we do have the bill as amended, and so discussion, conversation, motions. I'll entertain anything here. And we're on Senate Bill 902. Senator Lewis Young, do you have a motion? Okay, I have a favorable motion on Senate Bill 902 as amended. Is there a second from Senator Hester? Okay, let's go do a roll call again.
All right, Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine.
Yes.
Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion.
No.
Senator Gallion, no. Senator Watson.
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young.
Yeah.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks.
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carosa.
No.
Senator Carosa, no. Senator Hester.
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington.
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simonaire.
No.
Senator Simonaire, no. Senator Feldman.
Yes, bill carries 8-3. Let's next go to Senate Bill 1035, Senator Rosapep, Stacy. Yeah, and that bill still has to go to the Budget and Tax Committee before it hits the floor.
Senate Bill 1035, focusing Federal Career and Technical Education Act funds on Blueprint School to Work Apprenticeship Goals Act. Jeez. This bill requires the State Board of Education to collaborate with the Career and Technical Education Committee to develop a 4-year plan for CTE education in the state, including submitting a 4-year plan for the administration of the federal Carl D. Perkins Career and Technical Education Act of 2006. to the CTE Committee for approval. The bill designates the Maryland State Department of Education as the sole state agency responsible for implementation of Perkins. Beginning in fiscal 2025, the CTE Committee must review MSDE's proposed use of Perkins funds to ensure consistency with the blueprint for Maryland's future as specified. The bill expands the duties of the CTE Committee to include allocating funds received from Perkins. Finally, the bill makes conforming changes and repeals obsolete language. There are amendments in your packet offered by the sponsor, Senator Rosapep. Those are on page 39 with the reprint beginning on page 41. These amendments require the State Board of Education and the CTE Committee to work collaboratively on the four-year state plan for CTE and ensures programmatic and fiscal alignment with the federal Carl D. Perkins Act and the blueprint for Maryland's future. MSDE and the State Board are retained as administrator of the funds received under the Perkins grant. The governor is required to resolve any disagreement or disputes arising out of or in connection with the joint approval of the state plan.
Okay, questions? We're going to start with Senator Washington.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Stacy, what is the CTE committee?
The Career and Technical Education Committee was created under the blueprint to essentially set the standards for all of the CTE programs that would be part of the post-college and career-ready pathways.
Are they a unit of government or are they a committee of the AIB? Like how are
they? Are not. They are
So
not a
what
committee of the AIB.
What is it?
So they're their own committee and they're a unit under the Workforce Development Board.
So they're not in the Department of Education?
No.
Okay, so it's the Workforce Development Board. Okay. So I guess I just want to reiterate, I know we're not going to do that bill this year, but again, this is my concern about plenary authority and mission creep and with regard to implementation of the blueprint. But this section, colleagues, this section of the code has to do with the state's federal relationship. It's, you know, how it's spending the Carl D. Perkins federal money. That's correct, right?
That's correct.
And inserted in here is sort of a relationship between not a unit government, you know, but a committee in two different departments about how to handle money.
Well, I mean, in essence, they're aligned because what the CTE grant money does, it's to support CTE, it's federal money given to states in a formula-based formula to support CTE programs in high schools and post-secondary institutions. So that's the whole goal of the CTE is specialized knowledge to give standards to the CTE programs in the post-CCR pathway. So in some ways, it's very aligned because this is federal money for that exact purpose.
Okay, so, I'll just, I would like to hold this bill in that and I appreciate what some of the amendments are, but it's a real change. I mean, it's going from the State Department of our State Department of Education, which is our policy and budgetary entity, along with the State Board, with federal money, right? Not having to do specifically with, I mean, again, yeah. So, and it's telling this committee to align itself with the board. Also, I don't think it's necessary because when I look in the code, there's already a provision in the acceptance of the federal act that talks about that the CTE committee or the state board can work together. And then there's another provision about making sure that it aligns and consistent with the implementation of the CTE, but it changes a lot of other relationships, colleagues, and power and of authority that again speaks to what I that we need a broader look at the blueprint. But again, having our state board reporting to a committee in another department and then having it's.
Well, I think
And
as
then-
originally drafted, it did that, but it does not do that any
It
longer. The
does some of
amendments were worked out with MSD specifically because the sponsor has had this concern about this, how the grant was administered. And the State Department had said, look, we can only, under our federal MOU, under the Perkins grant, only we, as the State Department, can be the fiscal agent and use these funds. So it does not change that relationship, even though the bill originally as drafted had done that.
I still would like to hold it as, again, I think it's repetitive. I think it's not, I'd like an opportunity to, if it's needed to clarify this relationship, that it's done in a part of the code where it's, appropriate. I don't think
Okay.
it should be in this part of the
Okay,
code.
before we do that, Senator Carozza, you want to get out a question before we?
I just wanted to share with my colleagues that I serve on the Apprenticeship Commission with Senator Rosa Pep. And this is all the coordination in this bill and what we've been doing with the Apprenticeship Commission. This is on track, especially to meeting the blueprint school to work goals. So I'm very encouraged and wanted to move the bill. So I just want to go on record that, with the amendments, it makes it a much stronger bill. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Washington, are you pressing? Okay, guys, since we're already going to be voting because we held the other bill tomorrow. Okay, we'll hold this one just till the next voting session. So Senator Washington, if you have amendments, you need to attend with those, and then we will take this bill up. And so Senate Bill 10335 will be held until our next voting session, which will be tomorrow. Next up, let's go to Senator Heddleman, Senate Bill 951. Alexis.
Senate Bill 951, Business Regulation, Electric Vehicle Supply Equipment, Regulations for Retail Use. This bill requires the comptroller to adopt regulations pertaining to the retail use of electric vehicle supply equipment, including payment options, prohibition of subscriptions to initiate a charging station, establishing requirements for transparent information, etc. There are sponsor amendments in the bill, beginning on page 21 in our packet, excuse me. So these sponsor amendments establish the electric vehicle supply equipment work group. Instead of codifying the requirement for the comptroller to establish regulations, it is pared down into a work group. The work group will last for 2 years. It'll be chaired by the chair of the Public Service Commission and also staffed by the Public Service Commission. The work group is tasked with developing a framework for reliability and reporting of EV charging stations and studying and making recommendations that were similar to the regulations to be adopted by the comptroller under the original bill. On the work group, there are several members that are required to participate. However, MEA is not included, and that was an additional request that we may be able to entertain in addition to this or separately for their participation on the work group.
Okay, did you, this additional membership from MEA, was that something the sponsor,
I'm not sure if there were conversations with the sponsor.
Okay. Vice Chair Kagan.
Mr. Chair, just a quick question. This came up once before. I think it was a Simon Air bill on page 27. And I know we want to keep work groups small, but with one member from the Senate, one member of the House, it's not my job to be an advocate for the minority party, but seems to me that when there are 2 and 2, that we're more likely to have one Democrat, one Republican. And if they bring a different perspective, sometimes that's valuable. So I put that out there for the committee's consideration. Okay, Senator Simon Air looks indifferent. You're okay?
Okay, before we, Landon, you're there. Okay, explain to the committee why it would be important for MEA to be part of this work group.
Thank you, Chairman. For the record, Landon Farrig, Legislative Liaison for MEA. MEA is deeply intertwined with EVSE in the state. Not only do we operate a statutory EVSE program that has helped support the deployment of EVSE for several years now, We also interact with the commission and the utility run Public Service Commission overseeing utility pilot program for EVSE as well.
Okay, so we have, okay, somebody like to move an amendment that would add MEA to this work group? Okay, second from Vice Chair Kagan. All in favor of that amendment, raise your hand. Okay, let's go back to the sponsor amendments. Is there a motion to move? Okay, before we take up those next amendments, Senator Carozza, you wanted an opinion?
Well, I wanted, before we moved on, I wanted
Sure.
to speak in support if there was an amendment to add to each body, because given as we're working these EV issues and the hearings we've had in here and on the floor, it's clear that we have a lot of issues to work through. And for instance, you see somebody like Senator Hershey with his knowledge on this. So I certainly would support that and think it would be actually beneficial from a work group I've served on in the past. For the child custody, we had one Republican, one Democrat from the Senate on it. So there was an example of this.
So let's take that up next. First, let's go back to the sponsor amendments, then we'll go back to Senator Kagan and Senator Carozza's modification as well. Do we? No, we just have is there a motion to move the Yes, and then we have a second from Vice Chair. Okay, so all in favor of the sponsor amendments, this is in addition to the raise your hand. All opposed, those amendments carry. Now back to Vice Chair Kagan and Senator Carozza's discussion about some additional modifications to the work group makeup.
So I think it's okay, so.
Okay, what? You gotta be clear, we gotta make sure we know exactly what we're doing okay with.
Senator
here.
Carozza, I think diversity is important. I think having more, not making it a lot bigger, but I think political diversity, because it's gonna come back to us. I'm gonna move 2 and 2, 2 senators, 2 delegates.
Okay, but what is that? That doesn't do with party, it's just 2 senators. I don't.
2 members, fair. No, I just said 2 senators, 2 delegates. It's obviously up to
Okay,
it's the prerogative of the speaker and the
okay,
president.
so we've got 2 senators, 2 delegate amendment. Okay, does anybody want to move that amendment? Do you want to move that amendment?
Yeah, that's what I just said.
Yes, okay,
And
well,
she just seconded.
did you second that, Senator Carozza, the 2? Okay, discussion? Yes, Senator Augustine, before we.
Yeah, I mean, the only discussion is just from having participated on work groups, I just find that you have a limited number of folks who have sort of capacity and might be interested. And sometimes it's just not a good look either when you've got folks on there and they aren't able to really participate. And it's just not good with the public and everything else versus maybe just like someone who's really into it, interested, which is I'm imagining the sponsor is, to do stuff. It's just an observation of mine, having been on work groups that don't have, they are not a good look often for us.
Okay, Vice Chair Kagan.
I'm just gonna suggest 2 things. First off, Senator Carozza has already seemed to nominate Senator Hershey or maybe herself, but she just spoke on the last bill as part of the RosaPep task force work group, whatever it was, and has expertise and passion about apprenticeships. And so it's not just a Senator RosaPep thing. It's also a Senator Carozza thing. For this senator, I think that's valid and worthwhile. And if it turns out that no one else is interested, then it will be a vacant slot. I don't think the world ends. But where there's an opportunity, I do think that inclusion is better.
Okay, any additional discussion about this, the Kagan Carozza amendment? Okay, we'll take a roll call on the Kagan Carozza amendment to go 2 senators and 2 delegates. Lemuria?
All right, Senator Kagan?
Aye.
Senator Kagan, yes. Senator Augustine? Senator Augustine, yes. Senator Gallion?
Yeah.
Senator Gallion, yes. Senator Watson?
Yes.
Senator Watson, yes. Senator Lewis Young?
Yes.
Senator Lewis Young, yes. Senator Brooks?
Yes.
Senator Brooks, yes. Senator Carozza?
Yes.
Senator Carozza, yes. Senator Hester?
Yes.
Senator Hester, yes. Senator Washington?
Yes.
Senator Washington, yes. Senator Simoneau? Senator Simoneau, yes. Senator Feldman?
Going to be like Senator Augustine, yes. Okay. Okay, that amendment carries. We have now in front of us, the piece of legislation, Senator Heddleman, Senate Bill 95151, as amended. A motion from Senator Augustine, favorable. Is there a second?
Sure.
Second from Vice Chair Kagan. Okay, discussion. All in favor, Senate Bill 951 as amended, raise your hand. All opposed, that bill carries. Let's go down to Senator Reedy, Senate Bill 1074, Dara.
Okay. Senate Bill 1074, Environment Industrial Sludge Utilization Permit Establishment. This bill was essentially rewritten by the sponsor's amendment, which I hope you all received last night. As amended, the bill establishes a food processing residuals utilization permit. Pardon me, I should add that the reprint of the amendment itself begins on page 45 of your packet, and the reprint begins on page 61. So as amended, this bill establishes a food processing residuals utilization permit, which authorizes the holder to utilize food processing residuals, or FPR, in conjunction with an agricultural operation, which is defined in the amendment. The bill establishes requirements for utilizing the permit, application requirements, notice requirements on the part of the Department of Agriculture, requirements for maintaining a permit in good standing, information requirements, right of entry for the department, and penalty provisions. The bill also establishes the Food Processing Residuals Administration Fund. The amendment requires the department, in consultation with the Department of the Environment, to adopt certain regulations. Finally, the amendment authorizes the Department of Agriculture to administer a commercial hauler certification program.
That it?
That's it.
Okay, questions for Dara on the Senator Reedy amendment package? Yes, we'll go to Senator Gallia and then Senator Carrizo.
Concerns with this as far as infringing on right to farm, has that been addressed through these amendments? And now, so like, where are these different, have we heard with the amended version, have we heard from like Farm Bureau or Mako or?
I have not heard back from anybody in relation to this finalized amendment.
All right. If it's possible, I'd like to take a look at this.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I will, in the interest of full disclosure, there was some talk about some additional amendments. I asked Senator Reedy if he wanted us to hold it or wait, and he said just move it, but if you need some additional time to, because there could be, but we don't have them, they didn't get submitted. I'm just giving you.
I was just thinking, since we already had two bills held.
Okay, let's roll, let's go. We're gonna hold 1074. And next, finally, we got the final two bills are the two Kramer bills. We're gonna start with 1055. And Dara, back to you.
Senate Bill 1055 prohibits a person from keeping more than 5 roosters per acre, or more than a total of 25 roosters on a single property beginning January 1st, 2026, unless authorized by the Department of Agriculture. There is one amendment. The amendment clarifies that the bill does not require the department to conduct additional inspections beyond those inspections required by law. There was no opposition testimony at the bill hearing.
Okay, discussion. Sure, Senator Simoner.
So a property owner could have more than 5, but they just have to get approval from the department?
Yep.
Okay, so basically we're trying to ban those. They think they're having cockfighting.
Yes.
Other ones can keep.
And there are certain, for example, commercial poultry producers,
Right, that are
schools,
exempted.
all
Right,
those
right.
things are exempt as well.
Okay, additional questions? Okay, does anyone want to move that sponsor amendment? Okay, Senator Lewis Young, second from Senator Brooks. All in favor of that single Kramer sponsor amendment, raise your hand. All opposed, the amendment carries. We now have Senate Bill 1055 as amended in front of us. Discussion? Okay, yes, question from Senator Augustine.
This does not have any impact on local jurisdictions that may have restrictions already on roosters.
Dara?
and chickens?
It would not impact if they have a more stringent standard.
Okay, all right, because I know we have some of those things. All
Okay.
right, thank you.
Any additional questions? Yes, was there a motion favorable on the bill as amended? Brooks, is there a second? Second from Senator Lewis Young, okay, and again, further discussion before we take a vote on the bill. Again, we're on Senate Bill 1055 as amended. Okay, all in favor of the bill 1055 as amended, raise your hand. Okay, all opposed, that carries unanimously, which brings us to our final bill, Senate Bill 761. And we're gonna go back to you, Derek.
Senate Bill 761, testing facilities that use animals, licensing and regulation. This bill requires each testing facility defined in the bill in the state to be licensed by the Department of Agriculture to use animals in research, education, or testing. The bill establishes the position of State Inspector of Animal Welfare to inspect testing facilities, prohibits the use of certain dogs or cats for research or testing purposes, prohibits the use of traditional animal test methods under certain circumstances except as specified in the bill, establishes penalties, requires certain reporting, and establishes the Animals and Research Fund, which would primarily be funded by licensing fees that must be set to cover the department's implementation costs. There are no amendments to the bill.
Okay, let's open up some questions. Yes, Senator Simon.
So I've been looking at fees this year, so I was just curious, what would the fee would be for a licensee for his?
So if you look at, I think it's pages 7 and 8 of the fiscal note, it kind of touches on this. Not every testing facility that needs to be licensed would need to pay a fee. And so it's, one moment. In the bill, it's on top of page 6. The department shall charge a licensing fee to one, a testing facility that uses vertebrates not covered under the Federal Animal Welfare Act, and to cover the cost of implementing this title. In the fiscal note, it references the Department of Agriculture, bottom of page 7, top of page 8 of the fiscal note. The Department of Legislative Services notes that there are likely at least some facilities that need to be licensed, but are not subject to the licensing fee. MDA estimates that there may be between 6 to 8 facilities subject to the licensing fee. For illustrative purposes only, based on that information and the estimated costs described, the licensing fee would need to be between about $18,000 and $24,000 in fiscal 2025 to cover the department's minimum anticipated costs in that year. If the fee was not set at that level, the fee revenues would not be sufficient to cover the department's costs, in which case general funds may be needed.
So 18 to 24,000 if.
Based on there being 6 to 8 facilities subject to the licensing fee and to cover the estimated costs for the department.
And then last one, Mr. Chair, is that a one-time fee or do they have to do a renewal at some point?
Not aware of a renewal or the length of time of the, there's nothing about renewal in the bill.
Okay,
So it would be a
again,
one-time fee.
let's open it up for, before we finish up, and we do have Senator Elford. This is, by the way, Senator Elford, this is our last bill, so okay, any let's get whatever questions. We're gonna start with Senator Hester.
Just looking through the testimony and trying to figure out, does USDA already have to inspect these facilities?
Derek?
There is federal inspections. My understanding is generally that there's an enforcement concern when it comes to.
There what?
There's an enforcement concern when it comes to this. But there are the Animal Welfare Act, I believe, does have provisions in relation to this.
Okay, and then what were you said 8 facilities would have to, like, are these?
According to the department, there are they estimate between 6 and 8 facilities that would have to pay the licensing fee. Now, other facilities would need to be licensed. They just wouldn't have to pay the fee. Testing facility is defined in the bill, and it's broader than the scope of the fee would just be testing facilities that use vertebrates not covered under the Federal Animal Welfare Act. The Animal Welfare Act does not cover the following animals. Apparently, a farm animal is used for food or fiber, cold-blooded species, horses not used for research purposes, fish, invertebrates, or birds, rats, mice. Now, of course, all of those aren't vertebrates.
Okay, Senator Lewis, yeah?
I noticed that educational institutions are exempt from this, so like medical schools. So is it possible that they're already inspected, but the private institutions that this bill covers are not?
Stacy, do you have any idea of it? That doesn't come into your. Oh,
Okay, why don't you put that question? Maybe Stacy's. in the
Sorry.
question.
What was the question?
So I noticed that in this bill that educational institutions are exempt from this bill. So I'm assuming that means like medical schools, or it could be a graduate biology class, something like that.
What's the term? Does it
Pardon me?
say?
So I'm wondering if they are already inspected and the private facilities that are covered by this bill might not be covered already.
school or institute of higher education.
That's like any post-secondary educational institution.
Okay, Senator Hester?
There are, I should perhaps add as well, there are different agencies at various levels that cover the products in question,
Right, so
which is the tests that are being done for it.
So, I mean, I feel like there's been, you know, a lack of oversight in some instances. And so this bill looks like it's trying to provide that additional oversight that you mentioned, right? But I think it's a little odd that there's nothing in here from the Maryland Department of Agriculture. Has anybody checked with them just to make sure that they're?
Do we have a position from Maryland Department of Ag on this bill?
I do not believe so.
Okay, guys, here's what, because I'm getting a few texts. Folks seem to want to have a little bit additional information before we take a vote on this bill. So since we're already holding some other bills, I think we're gonna hold 761 and we will put this on again tomorrow's list with the other three bills we held. And again, folks are shooting me texts that they'd like at least a little additional information